Hello guys, welcome to my channel and to another Upcrate unboxing video. Yeah, without further ado, let's open the box. Oh wow, what's that? So first of all, we have an X-Acto knife or art knife or whatever you want to call it by Ecobra. So next up we have something that looks like dip pens, but I'm actually not sure. These could also be some kind of knives because these nibs don't really look like they would hold any ink. But I'm not sure, I'm not an expert. And since we have Indian ink here, these might be just dip pens after all, but let's see what the bottle post says. And we have a Clayboard, the ultimate multimedia panel. Oh, I think I know where we're going with this box. Because it says scratch and detail and texture, so these are for scratching. Okay, interesting. Let's see what we have here. So next up we have the bottle post with the super nice cover, and the topic is starting from scratch. So I think we're onto something here. So we have a scratchboard and a clayboard, and it looks like underneath the very top layer there's like white, so you scratch and get white underneath and you can add color. So maybe that's what the Indian ink is for. Even though black on black doesn't make much sense, so maybe the Indian ink is for this clayboard. I don't know, I'm really clueless here. We got some paper, which is see-through. Okay. Some black tissue paper. And a super nice art print by Connor's Studio, and apparently including the outlines of the artwork. So you can recreate this if you want. And we got some black and white stickers. So let's find out what the paper is for and the clayboards and whatever. So I had a look at the bottle post, and this Upcrate box is probably the most interesting so far because scratch art, or whatever you want to call it, is definitely not my usual kind of art, but we will see. So first of all, this is transfer paper. This especially is graphite paper, so you can transfer your sketches to the clayboard or the scratchboard. And here's the thing. The scratchboard is, as you can see, black, and if you scratch, there will be a white layer underneath, so you can add in the highlights of your artwork, just like this. And the clayboard is actually for practicing. You can apply a layer of Indian ink on here and then let everything dry, and after it's dried, you can just scratch the ink away, similar to the actual scratchboard. And you can also use this Indian ink to cover up any mistakes you make on the scratchboard, so that's really cool, because when I realized that this is scratch art, I was a little scared, because if you make a scratch, the scratch is there, and if you make a mistake, the mistake is there, and yeah, at least you can cover it up with Indian ink, so I'm a little more relaxed now. So since I'm really curious, I will start testing right away, but of course I won't use the scratchboard because this is for the final artwork, so I'll put that aside. Instead, let's open the Clayboard. Or maybe let's test the knife first. So, wow, okay, this is super sharp. So I really gotta be careful. Wow. So the Clayboard feels super smooth. So the only thing that's missing is a brush or anything to apply the Indian ink, but since I received a lot of upgrades in the past, I have a lot of brushes, so let me have a look. So I think I will use this one. Please don't ask me which brand this is. I have no idea, really, no idea. Huh, okay. So what's this? This looks like some weird eyedropper tool. Or did it break or something? Is it supposed to look like this? I'm confused. Okay, this is oddly satisfying. I'm not sure, should I use my brush or do you actually have to apply it that thick? I don't know, I think I'll just wait for it to dry and see what happens. So while waiting for the ink to dry, which still isn't dry because I applied too much ink, but whatever, I had a look at the bottle post and tried to understand how all these materials work together. And first of all, we have our transfer paper here. And you can now take any reference picture you like, for example, this tiger, put this transfer paper on top, and then start tracing. So let's pretend I'm tracing a little smiley face. So super basic. And now I can put the graphite paper underneath and then put it on here. If my ink was dry, I could do this and then trace the little smiley and I would have the smiley on here. And then I can start scratching. And I think since that's the way the artist is doing it, I will choose a reference photo and just trace the outlines the way he did and hopefully end up with something similar like this. Maybe not a tiger because I feel like this is a little too ambitious, but maybe I find something else that I like, so yeah. And if this ink would be kind enough to dry, I would really like to start scratching, but maybe we can start by putting these scratch pen thingies together. So this goes in here. And this one goes in here. So this one has two different edges, like this one is a little more curved than the other one, and this one is pretty symmetrical. So I think I'll just start scratching where the ink is all dry already because I'm a little impatient because I'm super curious, so let's go. Yay, it works! So I think it's a little hard to see in the distance, but these are my first scratches. So then let's test this one and maybe use this side. Oh my god, I don't like the sound. There are some sounds in life that you really don't want to hear, and this scratching sound really gives me goosebumps, and not in a good way. So I think I'll be listening to music while doing the artwork. It's really fascinating how detailed you can get with this. And last but not least, we have the X-Acto knife, which will probably do the same thing. Okay, I feel like this is a little bit harder to control. However, I think you have a lot of different options here, like in the way you hold the knife. So this worked surprisingly well on this clayboard. The only thing I'm wondering is, if I apply the Indian ink on top again, will it look just as smooth as it did before? And can I start scratching all over, or is it like a one-time opportunity? So far it looks really good, however, I'm a little scared that I damaged the clay underneath, so yeah, I hope that's not the case, but we will see in a second, or in a minute rather. So the ink has almost dried, and I don't know if you can see it, but I can definitely see some scratches here, like where I scratched before, down here. And I hope I'm still able to scratch on there again without like feeling the old scratches. Okay, it doesn't work as well as it did before. So I definitely feel the scratches, and yeah, I think that could be tricky when it comes to details. Like, if you made a mistake and have to redo the details, it's maybe a little difficult, but we will see. So I think that's enough for now, and I'm still really curious what I can create with these materials, because it's definitely way out of my comfort zone. And yeah, I think I'll have a look at some reference photos and then just start with the artwork. I decided to go with the animal theme of the art print and chose to draw, or rather scratch, a cat. And I found the perfect reference photo on unsplash.com. However, I had to lighten it a little bit in Photoshop because I could barely see the lighter areas of the fur when the transfer paper was laying on top of it, because the lighter areas were still pretty dark. Since I have never tried scratch art, except for my lousy attempts as a child, I used the clayboard first. In the beginning, it was really weird to think only about the highlights and shadows and neglect all the midtones, but I quickly got used to it. However, working on the clayboard was kind of weird. Since I had practiced on it before, I felt like there were a lot of scratches under the ink already, which made everything feel, well, scratchy. Also, the ink was a little shiny, which made it a little hard to see where I had already scratched. Therefore, I didn't want to spend too much time practicing and started working on the scratchboard pretty soon. And I was really relieved when I made the first scratches because it was so much smoother than the clayboard. So I think the ink and clayboard combination is okay for practicing, but I suppose you can use the clayboard only a few times and then it will be full of scratches, since I discovered that there was not only black ink dust, but also some white dust, which is probably the clayboard base. I just started scratching and tried not to think too much about what I was doing because I just wanted to explore this medium. However, I still tried to keep in mind not to overdo it and just leave some areas completely untouched, and I think it worked quite well overall. In the end, I gotta say that this was a really nice experience because I learned a lot. My key takeaway is that a drawing works fantastically without midtones. However, on the other hand, only midtones without shadows or highlights does not work as well. This is something I have learned over time when drawing a lot with graphite. Usually, the bigger the contrast between the lightest and the darkest areas, the more interesting the drawing will look. So if one of my drawings doesn't look quite right to me, the first thing I check for is if I have added enough shadows and highlights, and that oftentimes helps a lot. For a first try, I'm really happy with my scratch artwork. There are definitely things I would do differently next time, but in general, I like it. And it was fun, even though it took quite some time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!